Welcome, everyone, to episode number 105 of Underserved. Joining me today is Vic Caruso, Senior IT Manager of Network at Unibuy, Rodamco, Westfield. Let's get started.
Welcome to this week's edition of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry, where we focus on stories of tech industry leaders, their insights, and their lessons learned. And now, your host, Andrew Jelina.
Vic, thank you so much for joining us today on Underserved.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's certainly a pleasure to be here.
So way back when, you grew up in sunny California, born in Santa Monica, raised in LA. What was that like?
Fun is the first word that comes to mind. Beach was definitely a part of everything we did. All the typical things you'd think of in Southern California, I experienced those. Playing in bands, being involved in music and the whole scene, and just having friends and having a great time.
Was there any skateboarding?
There was some skateboarding. I wasn't the best. Many of my high school buddies went on to do some pretty cool things. One of them actually works at Nike Skateboard. I'm not going to say his name, but he is still a close friend of mine, and we always get together and reminisce. But he's a skateboarder, and he works at a skateboarding shoe company. So definitely part of the culture.
Very cool. So you weren't just outside doing fun, cool stuff. You were also getting into computers. What was your first experience there?
Yeah, so I really spent quite a bit of time on my two personal computers. First was the VIC 20, and then the Commodore 64 was the one I really dove into and started learning programming using the fun and amazing language of BASIC. I really got into doing my own little if-then, go-to type programming with just some choose your own adventures storylines. It was very childish stuff, but it definitely gave me an insight into the coolness of being able to write code and churn out a product and have some fun with it.
So as a fellow member of the Commodore Army, I tell you that there's a whole bunch of prior underserved guests who got their start the exact same way. Like, ooh, I think games are cool. Maybe I could build one.
That's true. I never was cool enough to actually finish anything more than my little input and spit back another question type programming, but definitely didn't design a game. But I did end up working at a gaming company later.
Did you have the tape drive or the disk drive?
I think I started with the tape drive and I went to the disk drive, and it was just like, whoa, now I can download games, in 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. So it was pretty cool. And there definitely was an intro into the bootlegging world of Commodore 64 games. I had a certain cousin of mine. He had all the games, and we visited him on the East Coast, and it was amazing. All the fun things we got to play. Montezuma's Revenge and Russian Attack. God, there's so many Aliens was another fun one I love to play.
People were trading floppy disks like baseball trading cards back then with games on them.
It consumed at least a whole summer of mine doing that.
So you stay into gaming and eventually get a PC?
I did get a PC. I ended up doing more of Myst, Riven, Exile. I was all about that. Not exactly when it came out, a little bit after. But yes, I did. I got a Packard Bell, I think was my first PC. Horrible machine. I think my friend sold it to me. He worked at this electronics store. But that was a piece of crap machine. I ended up doing those types of games. I did, eventually get into console gaming after that. And oddly enough, I would end up working at a gaming company that was mostly PC games and also did console games.
Now, are you using it in the classroom at all? Are you taking any programming courses or word processing or?
I started doing my homework with my computer, and I had an OP data printer, a dot matrix printer. It was awesome. I thought I was just the cat's meow. I knew I was using my computer to do my homework. I'm like, this is amazing. I don't have to go backspace on the typewriter and do the little corrections, the tape corrections.
The whiteout and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the worst.
And then you read your paper at the end, you're like, I got to do it all over again. This page is messed up. I forgot a whole sentence. So that was great. I didn't do any programming courses. I think my wife was taking a Visual Basics course at one time, and I kind of tried to learn some things there. And I did a little bit of HTML on my own, but that was all self-directed. I didn't take any coursework for it.
So you end up going to college local at Loyola Marymount, and you decide on being a music major. How does that decision come about?
It's clear. Music and IT, they totally make sense. I didn't know the connection back then. Later in my career journey, it comes up again. But yeah, I've always been into music. As a young kid, I always had a favorite band. My parents loved R&B and rock and all kinds of stuff. So they got me into Michael Jackson, the Jacksons. And I think Michael Jackson was literally my first love, but then Kiss became that. That translated to the Ramones later, which then led me to the Motley Crues of the world, which led me to the Metallicas and the Slayers. And then I was off into thrash metal land.
You playing in bands when you're a teenager?
I did. Yeah. I was at Loyola High. We had a band called War Dance. Still to this day, one of my closest friends was the bass player in that band. We were like the high school band to go see. We would go play at the country club, and there would be nice little mosh pits going on. And all of our friends, plus my relatives, my brother, who also went to the school, and my neighbors, they all went to be at the pit. So it was a good time. But yeah, Loyola Marymount was after that. And I did study music there because I knew I wanted to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I knew I loved music, and LMU was literally down the block from me, and I could stay at home in my parents' garage, which they had redone for me. Put a bathroom in there and a sink and everything. So it was like a built-in dorm. I said, well, if I'm going to do something, I might as well do something I like. So I did music, and I became a percussion major. It was funny because that home became not only my home, like in my room, since it was separated from the house, it was not a huge space, but it was large enough to have a band practice in there. So all my bands that I was in at the time, we practiced there. But I also hosted study sessions for our music history classes. And we would literally stay up all night eating the Frito-Lay nacho cheese dip with tortilla chips and like candies and Coke, bottles of Coke. We would just stay up all night studying for music history. People would like knock out, fall asleep, wake each other up. Okay, come on, we're talking about the classical period now. We did a lot of that. And so it also doubled as a home for my best friend in elementary school, who I also started a band with. His name's Pete, and he's still a really good friend of mine. And he's also a colleague of mine. We talk IT all the time. He's a deputy CIO. Yeah, LMU was just a great experience for me.
Now, speaking of favorite bands, my favorite band of my adult life, probably since 93 or so, is Clutch. And you were in a band that opened for Clutch in 1995. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yes. So the band in question, first of all, yes, Clutch is a very good band. The band in question was named Excel, not the spreadsheet software from Microsoft, but the band, the skate punk crossover hardcore thrash band, Excel from Venice. They are the other popular band or band that came out of Venice, California. So everyone knows Suicidal Tendencies. These were like their little brother bands. But yeah, they were looking for a drummer. They'd recorded an album. The band was basically half of its former original self, and they recorded an album, released the drummer who recorded them. They were going to go on tour. And the friend of mine, the bass player from War Dance, who I'm still really close friends with, he knew the bass player from Excel. So he introduced me, did an audition. Guess where the audition was in my studio at my parents' house. Here's Excel. Dan from Excel was there, who everyone knows. That's like a known figure in the Venice world. He was sitting in my garage, and I auditioned and got the part. We went on tour, and during that tour, we supported a show in Minneapolis, and it was Marilyn Manson headlining, Clutch, and then we were the opener to the opener. So we did a very short set, but it was like 1,200 people, but that's how it all came to be.
And you were working at a credit union then too?
So I worked at a library first, which is where I met my girlfriend, who became my wife. But yes, that job was actually a temp job. I was actually entering checks into credit union members' accounts using my fabulous 10-key skills that I don't know where I got those from. I just started learning it. So that's how it started. But that led into me helping with the IT department, who was doing, we were prepping for Y2K. It was a big, huge thing. They needed help rolling out new PCs. So I volunteered to help. And that was kind of my first real IT job. But they had a good time with me there. And they had a whole mainframe computer set up in the data center upstairs on the second floor. That led to me, getting some skills, and I was able to then apply for a job at this new upstart company called eToys. Really cool opportunity. It was actually a customer service job. So I applied for that, got it. It was like, hey, this is a new startup company called eToys. We have a website and we sell toys. I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. And this was like 1998. And so, we were just about to hit that real big .com boom. And then the bust. We were one of those companies that was like kind of caught in the middle, like of all the hype. And so we were a very small operation. There was like maybe like 10 or 12 of us customer service reps. They quickly, after 2 weeks, promoted me to work director, which just means I was like a manager. And after that, they needed to set up, we expanded because 1998 was a good year. They IPO'd. I got a part of that. And after we IPO'd, we were bigger. And so we moved into a bigger customer service room down the hall in the same building off of Ocean Park Boulevard. But they needed a resource desk to be set up to support all the IT functions of the customer service division. So that was a desk that I managed, and I had a team of 4 guys plus myself who would deal with desktop support, phone support, any of the phone lines. We had call queue flow that we were managing within Sprint's hokey GUI that they had at the time. So yeah, we did all of that. We directed calls to this call center, that call center. That was my first real management experience in working with technology.
You are listening to the Underserved podcast. Underserved is produced by Maris Consulting Group, embracing the power of people in technology. For more information, visit mariscg.com. That's mariscg.com.
So is the company your typical .com where, hey, we're losing money on every unit, but we'll make it up in volume? Or were they more sane?
No, they were definitely of the former. And it was so bad that in 2000, they had an all-company meeting outside. They had moved corporate to the building that Activision Blizzard is currently in. But the CEO says, hey, guys, got some bad news. We're going to be shutting down the company. The reason why was they had bought this distribution center. We're going to just do this all ourselves. Too big, too fast. Not enough venture capital to support them at that point. So they let us all go. And that's when, at that point, good friend of mine, Todd Leonard, he called me and he's like, hey, you know what? I've been trying to get you to work with me. You don't have a job. Let's go. Let's do this. So he brought me over to his company.
Now, before that happens, you do get a parting gift.
Yeah, I did get a parting gift. Funny part about all this is it's all kind of like ties into, many people do believe in like other, like, you know, some people believe in God, other people believe in the universe. And this has been like a guiding force through my life too. So we pulled numbers. They were shutting down the call center and they're like, we have a stock room full of toys. We keep stocked in case customers call and say, I never received this. Okay, we'll send you one from our stock room. So in the stock room with all these cool toys, like some of them super high end, some of them are just like, you know, action figures. And I pulled number 2 out of the hat. And it was out of all of us customer service agents and people who worked for that division. There was only one person in front of me. They pulled number 1 and they decided to go into the storeroom. They could pick whatever they want. So they picked the most expensive Barbie that we had. And that left me to go, hey, how about that Sony PlayStation 2 in the break room? Can I have that? They're like, sure. So I took that. And there was also a drum set that I took with me as well. Those are my 2 parting gifts. PlayStation 2 ended up being kind of a clairvoyant glimpse of what was to come at my next job, which was working at Vivendi Universal Games.
Yeah, so Todd goes to Vivendi, convinces you to join. What's it like when you hit the ground there?
So I had desktop support experience. I also managed some team members there. I had telecom experience, didn't have any video conferencing experience. So Todd took me under his wing, taught me everything I would then learn about telecom. So supporting PBXs and phone lines and dealing with routers, muxes, and all kinds of crazy technology that no one uses anymore. But at the time, that's what we had in our IDF and our MDFs. And so he showed me everything. He gave me the space to learn an environment where it would be okay if I fried a PBX because I cut the wires all at the same time. It was just a very comfortable, safe place to learn. And Todd being a family friend, I couldn't ask for a better situation. It was literally 5 minutes from my house. We had space in 2 different buildings that were right next to each other in what is now the Howard Hughes Center down in the Playa Vista / Culver City, also known as Silicon Beach now, because that's the fancy way to call it. But yeah, he just let me be me. I ended up learning, Cisco networking, firewalls, a single one-man show who would be sent out to the small office, home office locations to set up their firewall, their switches, their phones, and their video conferencing units. I really got a lot of experience from that.
Now, at this time, they're putting out titles that are just like going gangbusters, right?
So Vivendi Games was the parent company of Blizzard. They had Scarface, they had The Simpsons Hit and Run, they had Half-Life and Half-Life 2, they had Spyro the Dragon for kids, a 50 Cent game, Crash Bandicoot, a bunch of like really heavy-hitting games.
And World of Warcraft, right?
Yes. And so they're the parent company of Blizzard, which has World of Warcraft, StarCraft, and a bunch of other games. But World of Warcraft is still going strong today. I ended up pilfering one of my ex-coworkers, and he works with me now at URW.
Very cool. So things don't exactly work out the way you'd planned, though. They end up folding, but kind of giving you a parting gift here of a different type.
See, it's the theme, right? Every time I leave someplace, I get a gift, which is like the gift itself is a gift, but also I didn't understand the full magnitude of the gift at the time. But yes, so 2000 2008 rolls around. We hear they're going to buy Activision. We're like, oh, this is awesome. We're expanding. And we're closing down our gaming division because of that. I'm like, oh no, we're all going to die. But they're like, but you know what? We don't want to leave you guys stranded. We're going to give you project management courses for free. So we were in a week-long project management session, which ended up counting for the 30 plus hours you need for coursework to take and sit in for the PMP test. I don't end up taking that till later in my career, but that coursework ended up counting for the units I needed to take the test. I had to get the experience too, because that's part of the PMP is you have to have, I think, 4,000 hours of project management on the job experience in order to sit for the test. So that was my parting gift from there. Another gift that I got from there, I had keys to certain rooms at the studios there. And we had this room in the basement that was completely pitch black if you didn't turn the lights on. It was basically this room in between where the studio components were. So then there's this middle room, and then there's another room where they would have their kids and other people who were testing games. They would interview them in that room, and it was a one-way glass, so we could see them, but they couldn't see us. And anyway, I had the keys to the middle room, and I would just go in there at lunchtime, sit in the dark, lay on the floor, and imagine, I would meditate basically is what I was doing. But I would imagine money falling all over me, and I would invoke like relatives who had passed away, teachers who passed away, and who were really big on my mind and really big influences to me. And I would just envision everything going the way I wanted it to go. And wouldn't you know it, they're telling us, hey, we're going to give you these project management courses, plus we're going to give you a severance package if you just hang on a few more months. So I had the choice, hang on a few months or look for a job. I get a call out of the blue after I set up my Dice account and put my resume on there. And I get a call that says, hey, we're looking for someone with your experience who's good at writing and who can work with executives. And I had all that listed on my resume, and we'll pay you double what you're making right now. I'm like, I put the phone down as I screamed to my wife, I'm like, oh my God, this is really happening. And I said, yeah, let me think about it. Yeah, I'll take it. And that started my consulting career. I ended up going to LA Superior Courts, which then proved to be just an amazing experience with people who were really, again, just like Vivendi Games with Todd Leonard, the people who I met at LA Superior Courts were super supportive of me and let me grow into a project manager, a communications analyst, and anything else that I could do. I ended up doing database work and queries, building queries for one of the projects I was working on there. Just a blessing in disguise that I did not know the magnitude of which.
So are you helping them handle like all of their case files or their workflow, or what's the kind of task?
Just a quick note about how I got the job. I interviewed for the position, and the interview went really well. The CIO was like, there's a connection. There's a connection between IT, math, science, music. And I was like, oh, yeah. And in my head, I'm like, is there really?
Who doesn't
so I
know
looked
that?
it up. Who doesn't know that? Duh. Right? So he knew me as the music graduate and the guy who was the musician. The CIO did. So they do interview more people. They end up hiring someone based on the CIO's suggestion. The CIO meets the guy who they hired, and he's like, that's not the guy. He's like, I said the music major, the Caruso guy. And so I get a call back and I got the job. But I think it's funny that my music degree and the fact that I was doing music and studying music clicked with the CIO. And that's what got me into the LA Superior Courts role, which was my first project management proper job that I had gotten. And I was writing, to answer your question directly, the main reason they brought me in was to rewrite and renegotiate the relationship that the LA Superior Courts had with ISD, which is, I think, their internal services division. And ISD supports all the different county organizations and provides IT services, data center support, that kind of thing. And so I was rewriting that whole memorandum of understanding, MOU. And I was working very closely with the CIO. That was my first task. And they're like, hey, by the way, we have this project. You want to help us with it? And it was a project to roll out Wi-Fi at the criminal courts buildings. And so I, of course, said, yeah, I can do that. No problem. And I had networking experience at my prior job, a little bit of Wi-Fi, and I did have my project management course. So I'm like, what could go wrong? So everything went great. That was my first project there. And then the second project they assigned me was this archives records and information management system replacement. They had I think a green screen program they were using. And this is basically, if you imagine, you go to the archives department, you say, I want to find this case file. The staff would go, okay, let me go get it out of the hundreds of thousands of linear feet of case files that the LA Courts has. And it would just be like case files wouldn't come back. They wouldn't know where they were when they were trying to look for them. I think they did an RFP for it, and they said, we're going to go with this company. So that company, I think, was named Zazio, and they had this homegrown application for just this purpose. And this was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but we had to organize and get volunteers to label every single file, every single case file. It had a barcode on it, and we had to use barcode scanners and a laptop and scan each of these into a database, which was our Excel spreadsheet. And we had to upload those CSV files into the archives, records, and information management software until we had a full set of inventory. That's what I was doing with them. And that took months and months and months. Everyone hated me. I was like I was the PM who was like, hey, guess what? We're coming in this weekend, and I know you're IT, but you have to work in this dusty case file unit, and you have to climb up to the top of there and put stickers on, and the other guys scanning it in while you're doing that. And so no one liked me for that, but I did make a lot of friends there, even despite that. Another great experience. I met lifelong friends there. My coworkers, Ken, who was actually my boss, and Maria, I still keep in contact with them, and just great people. Great opportunity, and really good to work with all the different factions of IT.
Hey, sport. How was school today?
It was okay, Dad. How was work?
Actually, I had a rough day. Leading an engineering team is hard. I mean, I have to ship new software, meet deadlines, and tackle new projects while keeping my team focused on the day-to-day. It's hard to keep up.
Jeepers, Dad. Why don't you call Maris? They're the staffing firm with the best technical resources around. They helped Billy's dad. He used to be stressed out like you. He was missing deadlines, his team was overworked, and a bunch of folks left the company because it was too stressful. But then he called Maris. And they put resources to work right away. He hit all his deadlines and freed up his team to do other work. His boss was so happy that Billy's dad got some extra time off.
Time off? Wow. What did he do with that?
He spent it with Billy.
Aww. That's a swell idea, son. I'll call Maris today. Now, you go wash up for supper.
Now, are you stickering any famous case files?
Ooh, I will say, I can't talk about many of them, but there was a separate section they were like grand jury files, and only certain people were allowed in there. But yeah, I mean, LA County is infamous for the crazy, like, high profile cases. I mean, you got the Phil Spector case, you got Michael Jackson's doctor who gave him the dose that killed him. You have Chris Brown and Rihanna is in there. Yeah, I mean, all the case files you can think of that are the Night Stalker, for crying out loud, terrorized all of our childhoods. Us Gen Xers who grew up in LA. But yeah, there's just tons of those types of case files there. So there's an interest level there. And that system really made it easier for everyone to check out and also to find the case files. And that was the key thing, was like, no one knows where these things are. And like, hey, we just scanned that in and it says it's here in this shelf. So that's what we did.
So a coworker of yours ends up moving on and you end up going with her?
Yeah. So my PM mentor, her name's Dee Dee, and she ended up working at City of Pasadena. And she's like, hey, I have this project. I was looking to get permanent employment. This wasn't that she was offering me, but it was basically my rate and maybe a little more. And so I took it on. It was a huge project to basically do like 4 different projects and call it a program, where we were setting up data centers, moving a data center, setting up a new one, and then setting up a co-located data center as well. So it was huge. And all that while rolling out virtual desktops and profile management. So it was a lot in one fell swoop. And so they needed someone to manage that program of projects. And so she brought me on, and it was at City of Pasadena that I finally got the courage to take a boot camp for PMP, and I got myself certified as a project management professional.
Very cool. So what do you do with your newly minted PMP?
I'm looking at it right on the wall right here. I keep it as a reminder of, you can achieve things if you just put your mind to it. I also have my college degree there and my outstanding graduate in music for the class of 90 to 95, which they only give out to one college student. But what do you do with a PMP? You manage projects. You can do it officially, and you do have to keep up your hours. So those count towards your 60 PDUs that you need to do every 3 years. But I started taking on more projects with the City of Pasadena. They ended up assigning me to a project that was pretty substantial, again, as if the first one wasn't substantial. This one was replacing the whole parking management system with something that was modern and web hosted. and just involved all departments, many different departments in the city of Pasadena. And it was definitely, again, another painful project. I seem to get those projects that are like, no one wants to do this. Would you take it? I'm like, all right. But yeah, I took that on. And again, it was very in-depth in that I literally sat at people's desks while they were trying to figure out why the coding for the website wasn't working, or why when you scan this in, there's an extra character at the end. What's going on there? So this had all kinds of new technology and license plate recognition. You could schedule your court dates on there to go see a judge and talk about your parking violation. So all kinds of fun new stuff that the city didn't have at the time. And Pasadena is a very tech forward city. I still look back on my time fondly with I still keep in contact with folks there as well. One thing one of my teachers said, who's passed away, her name was Kay Carlson. She was my drum teacher. When she first met me, she told me, she said, Vic, you have this thing I like to call false courage. I'm like, what the heck is that? And she's like, you think you got it all, but you don't. You don't really know what you're getting yourself into. And, you may want to like tone that down a little bit. Her way, she was telling me, you take on these parts and you're like, I can play that. And you really can't. And you just got to work and work and work at it. And instead of like having that healthy attitude of, this is probably too much for me, but let me see what I can do. I would do the opposite. I got this. I'm going to do this thing. That kind of helped me get through these projects because I had no business taking on some of these projects when I first started, but I just knew I liked dealing with people. I liked dealing with technology, and putting the two together seemed to be a great fit for me. It's something that I carry with me today, even at my experience, my current job. I really do like working with people and technology.
So many folks suffer from a lack of confidence or imposter syndrome or whatever. I think you had a very good ailment.
I guess false courage is kind of like imposter syndrome, but from a different angle.
Yeah, I mean, parking management's not glamorous, but it's big money.
No.
If you can collect more, if you can make the scheduling of all the court date stuff move faster, those judges aren't cheap. It's
right. Exactly.
It's a big impact. So who convinces you to move from there to your current position?
So back to music. So I started off as a rock drummer. I eventually wanted to write. I tried to write for Excel, and it was a failed attempt. And I quit the band because I couldn't write. And I said, I tried to write. I really feel like I need to write, and I can't write in this band. I tried it, and no one likes the stuff, and I don't like it either. So I'm going to quit. So I wanted to produce hip hop and R&B. And that was my new thing that I wanted to do. As I told you, I had R&B, and I was definitely a hip hop head from the way beginning of hip hop and breakdancing and all the culture that goes along with it. I wasn't very good at it, but I loved it. Beat Street is one of my favorite movies to this day. It was cheesy B movie, but it's such a good movie, like for so many reasons, for the culture. But anyway, so I'm producing hip hop and R&B now. I joined a producers group that just meets up and shows tracks to each other. And producing in the hip hop sense, if you don't know, is you make the beats, basically. You make all the musical elements of the hip hop beat. You find rappers, you try to marry the two, and you end up becoming like an executive producer by doing all the board work and getting them, recording them, mixing, mastering. Anyway, through this producer group that I joined, I met this friend of mine who is also in IT, and he was the software project manager, and he gets this opportunity to come across his desk. He's like, this might be my next contract. I don't actually do this type of work. This is more infrastructure related. It's for this company called Westfield. Do you want to give it a shot? I think you fit for this. So I said, yeah, this looks great. So I called, I applied, got an interview, and that's how I got that job. Again, music led me to another opportunity. It was kind of like a dream job. So City of Pasadena, I started as a consultant, got converted to a permanent employee. The pay cut was pretty big. From that. So I was kind of hurting at that point. And so I was back into consulting, back into making my rate or then some. And then they kept me on for about 10 months and they hired me. This one CIO who was there most of my formative time there, Denise Taylor, she believed in me. And again, another mentor comes up and says, you know what, I think you can do this. And so she assigned me to one of the hardest projects that we had going. It was another program where we were going to basically demerge, couple the company, the Westfield company, the US and the UK version of it, from the Australian arm of it, which was a new and separate company that was managing Westfields out in Australia and New Zealand. So we were riding on all of their IT infrastructure. We needed to separate. So she set me up with that project, and I was flying back and forth to Australia, being the program manager of this huge demerger project between Center Group and Westfield. Of all the things I've ever been involved with, that was the most exciting thing I was involved with, just because it was travel, it was doing things on two sides of the globe and having to coordinate with all the different vendors we were dealing with, trying to spin up 2 data centers in, APAC region, not here in the Americas, and just having all the different parties from the UK, the US, and Australia and New Zealand work together. Can't even put a price on that experience. And I was getting paid well to do it too. So, win-win. Just an amazing experience once again.
So I've heard of lots of mergers, but this is my first demerger. I'm guessing that they had some sort of regulatory hoops that they had to jump through. And
yeah, and that's what the rationale was for the whole project. It was, listen, you can't be a separate company and share data on the same servers with a totally separate public entity. For Australian regulatory reasons, we had to do that. And so we did that project. We had to do the whole thing within like a year's time. It sounds like a long time, but it was so fast paced that we had to get this consultant, that consultant, these parties in to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the backside for us so that we could get things going, ensure that, we would meet our timelines and stay somewhat within budget.
do you get to enjoy Australia at all during that tumultuous year?
Well, going back and forth, I think it was 7 times for the project proper, and I went back an 8th time later. But yeah, I definitely got to know Australia, at least the east side, the CBD, or the city central business district. I got to know that pretty well. One of the last trips I took out there, I brought my family with, and we ended up spending time in the city in Sydney. And then we spent a week, which is probably, I don't even know if I'll ever be able to top this vacation with my family. We went to the Gold Coast, which is where the Great Barrier Reef is on the east side. And we took a prop plane out to this island called Lady Elliot. It's like an eco reserve. The landing strip is the diameter basically of the island. So you land and you actually from the plane, you can see manta ray swimming all over the place.
That's cool.
And so it was just this week long full of snorkeling. Me and my older son was 13 at the time. We got to go scuba dive, and we got to go underwater for like an hour, 50 feet underwater with a guide, and both fulfill a fantasy of ours. Just this crazy otherworldly experience because of my day job. I'm super thankful for all of that and super thankful for everyone who made it possible.
Now, I grew up in a town called Westfield and was kind of like, when I was out in San Diego, I saw the UTC there, like this gorgeous mall they have with Westfield stamped on it. I was like, what's that? Yeah,
and that is kind of our thing. So Westfield is a company started with the Lowy family. It was born of Mr. Frank Lowy. He is a Holocaust survivor. He started a company with his business partner, just the two of them. It was a little deli shop in this place called Westfield in Australia. There you go with the synergy in the name there. It just grew into this monster of a thing, and they were in Australia, then they branched out to New Zealand, then they wanted to get into the US and the UK, and the company always had a family feel to it, and still does, even though we're now a French company because we merged with another company. But yeah, it's been, I really feel like I fell into a group of people who are willing to, embrace us all learning at the same time and growing skills as we go, and just being a support system for each other.
Now, the kind of hallmark of these malls is that it's not just like go and buy a belt. Like they have like events and all sorts of stuff to try to drive traffic.
Yeah, and back to the point that you originally bring up. So you go to one of our shopping centers in the U.S. and across continental Europe now too, and you get an experience. And that's really what we're trying to do with the company now, is we're trying to move from go to buy some clothes or some products, which you can do online, as we all know, and turn it into hey, I'm going to spend the day here. I'm going to spend the afternoon here with my family. What can we get into? Maybe we have a doctor's appointment. We can go to UCLA Health. Maybe you want to go do some augmented reality, virtual reality stuff, Dreamscape at Century City, for instance. UTC. It feels like a resort when you're there. You can just sit outside and get some food and just chill in the sun. We have fitness clubs there. We even have car dealerships that, like Tesla, you can go in there and set up a test drive. You can look at models and determine like, hey, these are the features I want. So there's all these things that you can do in person, not to mention all the regular things that everyone knows about dining. We're trying to get a lot more food and beverage in there as a mix of tenants. So these are the things we want to do, experiences. And then you touched on it, live events. Century City, we had this place called the Atrium. We have live events there. World Trade Center, we had John Legend perform there. And we've had Lady Gaga events where she will broadcast to multiple centers. She'll be performing somewhere else, and then we're live broadcasting, and we host like a little jazz cafe. Those types of things are what we want to get into. We're in them already, but we want to do more of it. We're really trying to focus on experiential versus, come here and spend money on a product. Although we do have great products at our shopping centers as well. It's while you're doing that, you can do this other stuff.
From a technology perspective, machine learning or generative AI or AI in general, been shaping any of your direction there?
So we're just scratching the surface on that. We do have some initiatives going on internally to see how we can better our workflows and things like that. But you got to be careful, of course, company sensitive information. So we're working through all that right now. We have a center of excellence set up in the US and lucky enough to be a part of that. But and we're studying to see what we can do, how we can leverage it in a safe way for the company and in a way that can help our workflows and help our everyday life be easier as stewards of URW.
And then you're also on the board for Big Picture at URW, right? What's that?
We have several business resource groups, and Big Picture is one of them. It's our diversity, equity, and inclusion groups. And we're focused on highlighting the various cultures that are represented within our workforce. We do events like we host a Pride event at Hamburger Mary's. Shout out to Heather, who's also on the board with me, advocacy and engagement. But yeah, she definitely is a powerhouse. And we do events like Safe Spaces, which is something that I typically host. We bring up a really huge topic, social topic most of the time that is hard to talk about at work. You're really not supposed to talk about some of these things at work. But what we do is we try to take the sting out of it. We know it's affecting people. For instance, like some of the legislation or some of the Supreme Court rulings that had some really huge effects. The most recent one we did brought that up as a topic. Hey, how is this affecting your everyday work life? What are your thoughts on it from the perspective of your mental well-being? And is it distracting you at work? How can we help with that? And here are some tools and tricks that we employ ourselves to get through our day and feel like we're doing okay at the end of the day and still we're productive. So like we do things like we have an Insight Timer memberships for our staff. We try to promote those things. Hey, you have this tool you can use. It's free for you. Just sign up. So if you're feeling down one day, or if you like Supreme Court rulings or earthquakes in this part of the world, natural disasters over here, whatever it is, we did one on the Russian and Ukrainian conflict that's still going on. We did one about that, which you would think, hey, don't talk about that at work. But we know we actually have Ukrainian and Russian folks who work with us. They're close coworkers of ours. And we want to hear do they have family that's being affected right now? This is something that people think about on a level that's way above the work level. And so we know it affects productivity. So we wanted to create this safe space to where you can talk about these things and not get in arguments politically about things, but you can definitely say your feelings. And this is really affecting me. What can I do to help? So that's what we do.
So you have some sons. Are they into music or tech at all?
Yes and yes. I don't think you can be a Gen Zer and not be into tech. It's kind of like your life. You're a digital native now. You were born in the age where everything's online. Internet's accessible from every device you have. So yeah, so they're definitely both into technology from an ancillary kind of like it's part of my life type of thing. I think one of my sons could actually go into the field, but he's kind of resistant right now because that's what dad does. I don't want to do what dad does.
Boring.
Yeah, I like the Lakers. He likes the Celtics. It's that kind of thing. I like doom metal and he's listening to trap rap. So, and I respect all music styles and I love all music styles. Well, most, maybe not country. And then my older son, he's following a little more closely in my footsteps. He's been a drummer since he was 3, and he's in the marching band at CSU, Colorado State University, go Rams. But yeah, he's in the marching band there, and he also produces hip hop type beats, and he's trying to work with local artists in the area here. So yeah, he's definitely interested. And he also has an affinity for tech as well. I want to try to push them in that direction if I can, but being the dad, I'm just not the cool guy to listen to anymore.
Amen to that. Vic, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences with the listeners of Underserved.
Andrew, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for affording me the opportunity.
You're very welcome. And we'll talk to everyone soon on the next episode of Underserved.
Thank you for listening to the Underserved podcast. For more information on the topics discussed and for show notes, visit the show website, underserved.fm. And please be sure to rate, like, and subscribe to Underserved on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.